Welcome to the Startup Competitors Podcast, where we talk with early-stage entrepreneurs to understand what information they use to inform product roadmap, strategy, and market differentiation.
Hey there. This episode, I chat with Ilya Preston, who's the co-founder and CEO of Paxafe. We go deep into the world of supply chain and logistics and talk a lot about the software, hardware platform that they're putting together. And it turns out to be a pretty awesome plug for the generator program as well, which is accidental and unintended. But we also are involved a little bit with the generator team and think very highly of them. So that was really cool that emerged a little bit organically in the podcast. So check them out as well. If you are not a subscriber to the podcast, please do that. Leave us a comment online or shoot me an email at mkelly@startupcompetitors.com. Always love the feedback, and please enjoy this episode.
This episode is brought to you by Full Stack PEO. Most founders start companies because they figured out a better way to solve a problem or serve a need, not because they love tracking payroll, filling out compliance forms, and explaining employee benefits packages. And yet, all that stuff still has to be done. That's why there's Full Stack PEO. Full Stack PEO specializes in turnkey HR for emerging companies, not just those core services, but advice and expertise that help founders maximize employee potential. Curious? Find out more at fullstackpeo.com.
Welcome to the podcast. Today we have Ilya Preston, who is the co-founder and CEO of Paxafe. Ilya, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Why don't we start with the quick elevator pitch for Paxafe?
Sure. So we build smart parcel IoT solutions that aggregate critical data from the supply chain and enable cheaper, more intelligent shipping and cargo insurance. So if you think of the global supply chain as a whole, it's kind of like the Wild West, right? There's a lot of B2B and B2C shipments that are shipped all over the world. And really across the board, there's kind of an overarching theme where there's just a true lack of real-time visibility. And that results in a lot of inefficiencies. That results in a lot of theft, counterfeit, product damage, and product loss to the tune of over $600 billion of losses a year. Right. So it's definitely a big deal. It doesn't discriminate based on the verticals or the types of companies that are involved. When you think of pharmaceutical companies and medical devices, they have to ship in tight temperature and humidity tolerances. They have to ship in accordance with FDA and DSCSA regulations. Food manufacturers have to abide by those same temperature and humidity regulations. High value shipments are often subject to theft and counterfeit. So it's a problem across the board. And really, if you take it one level deeper, think about how you have to insure these shipments. So obviously, these shipments require some form of shipping or cargo insurance. And that area has seen, a little bit of trouble. It's a lot harder to do than you would imagine. In fact, over the last 5 years, cargo insurers have actually paid out more in claims than they've brought in premiums. And we've identified, two kind of main reasons as to why we believe that's happening. So first is there's really just a lack of data from the supply chain. If you think about an excursion that happens, theft or counterfeit or damage, a claim is filed with the insurance provider. They then have to go out manually and basically try to do a full root cause analysis and figure out what happened, where it happened, when it happened, who had custody. But all of that is based on historical assumptions. It's based on qualitative information. And then secondarily, that information that they receive, those assumptions are then what's driving future underwriting policy. So it's a broken system. It's a broken process. What we do is we provide hardware and software, a platform that provides kind of a digital footprint that's capable of answering who, what, when, where, and how with regards to any given shipment. And what this does is it enables these shippers, these logistics carriers, and the insurance providers to basically do three things. Number one is maximize their ability to salvage or save any at-risk shipments real time through these real-time alerts. Number two is minimize that time and labor trying to figure out what in the world happened after an excursion occurred. So a claim is filed. We can import that digital footprint directly into the insurance claims workflow and automate that whole process. And number three, perhaps most importantly, we capture all sorts of data, everything from, shipment zip code risk, time, day or night that the package is being shipped, number of planned and unplanned stops along the way, the courier that's used, the type of packaging that's used, even the driver on any given route, third-party data like traffic and weather patterns, et cetera. And we feed all this through our internal kind of machine learning engine. And what this does is it enables us to spit out a form of a risk assessment. We call it our adaptive insurance score, which to the insurance side enables them to price their policies based on actual supply chain risk, as opposed to this kind of overarching, what is your shipment of your value worth, or what is the value of your shipment worth? And then alternately on the shipper side, it provides them the ability to optimize their supply chain decisions based on speed, risk, or safety of the package.
All right. So that was legit. You took a space that I know absolutely nothing about, and you broke it down very nicely. I think I understand what you guys do. Are you selling to the manufacturer, the carrier, or the insurer?
Yeah, so that's a great question. By and large, we're selling to the manufacturer, to the OEMs. We do have, so right now, just to kind of preface all of this, we are in beta testing with 9 enterprise partners. So we're not yet commercially launched. That's coming up later this year. The majority of those are shippers or OEMs. We do have one carrier, and we also do have one insurance company as a part of those pilots. But those are a bit of a unique case where they have a specific application or use case. By and large, it's the shippers or the OEMs.
Perfect. And you just rolled nicely into what is typically the next set of questions, which is current status of the company. So just kind of break down maybe how you got to where you are today, and then paint a picture of what the company looks like today. That could be team size. You already hit kind of the number of beta customers. If you guys are raising funds raised, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So we're a relatively young company. We started about 16 months ago or so. We were actually born going through the Generator program, which is a nationally ranked accelerator program out in Milwaukee at the end of 2018. We're a team of 4 now, full-time, and we have about 6 full-time contractors as well. So we are very much growing. We're definitely pre-product market fit. We have 9 enterprise partners that are on board and piloting our solution. About 400 TrackX. That's our first product to the market. 400 TrackX units out there in being piloted today, or I should say probably pre-COVID-19. That was the case. And yeah, we raised our first kind of institutional round in 2019, have a great group of investors as a part of that round. Rondo Ventures, group out of the Midwest, presence in Missouri and Utah. They led the round. We have, Northwestern Mutual and their seed fund as a part of that original institutional round, Cream City Ventures. And then some other great groups, early stage VCs, Comeback Capital out of Ohio, Right Side Capital Management out of San Fran, Generator, obviously the accelerator program, and then some micro VCs and angels as well. We are going to be raising a next round, our seed round, later this year. And, had COVID not happened, I think we would basically be announcing that raise closer to the end of this month. But with everything that's been going on over these last couple of weeks, or I guess I should say couple of months, we're probably looking more so at a Q3 timeline for that raise.
Got it. And is that delay primarily just because you're nervous about what has happened to capital in the last couple of months, or is it just because it's made it impossible to run the beta program as effectively as you were hopeful that you'd be able to?
Yeah, no, that's a fair question.
Or yes, all the above.
No, I'd say it's definitely a bit more of the latter. I think we could go out and complete a raise. We have a part of that round already filled up, so we do have firm commitments towards that round. The biggest thing is, I mean, the betas were in large part going to be driving things like valuation, certain terms,
Yeah.
and without having, I would say that strong customer validation from beyond just a few customers, from across the board, basically the 9 partners that we're piloting with, it certainly displaces some of the leverage that we would have from our end. And it's more or less a strategic decision, and it also makes sense from the standpoint that we were able to extend our burn, from a startup standpoint, from a, pre-seed/seed stage company. We're actually, I would say, doing relatively okay compared to, we're certainly not sitting on, King Midas's treasure, but we have a pretty strong runway, and we're able to make that kind of a decision. We're fortunate enough to be able to make that kind of a decision and pause and basically resume the raise probably in Q3.
Got it. Right on. All right. Talk to me about competition. When you think of competitors in the space, who or what comes to mind?
Yeah, so the asset tracking market as a whole is about more than $12 billion. It's a pretty saturated market. But if you go and talk to, and you could actually go Google, pretty much any Gartner analyst or VP, you can go talk to any carrier, any shipper. The number one theme or pain point that comes up recurrently in this space is this lack of real-time visibility end to end through the entire supply chain. Why? Essentially, all of these providers are providing raw data. There's a lot of telematics companies out there. There's, temperature data loggers, there's GPS sets, there's, RFID solutions, but most of these are providing raw data, and it's passive. It's not real time. It's not contextualized. So, you might get, latitude, longitude coordinates, or you might get, a shock sensor that tells you that, hey, this package has just undergone a shock, but that doesn't really tell you anything. You don't know if that shock was caused from a package drop, of a package that was poorly fastened in a truck, or if the carrier, threw it against the door, or if he or she was, carrying it under their arm and it was just bouncing around, or if it was poorly packaged or sliding around in the back of a truck on a pallet. You don't get that level of contextualized differentiation, and that makes it difficult for carriers and particularly insurance companies to go in and, perform their root cause analysis and really put any credence to that data. Secondarily, the solutions that exist are very piecemeal. There's not a strong level of integration with existing ERP.
How do you get that level of granularity?
Yeah, so that's some of the great work that we've recently brought on some machine learning engineers, and they're looking at actually building out models and algorithms, looking at sensor movements and analyzing those sensor movements, looking at variables like pressure, package tilt, vibration, far beyond what's kind of currently collected in a typical shock sensor environment, and looking at these conjunctions and different variables of movements and analyzing them, and then putting hypotheses together, that say, hey, based on these 6 variables or 8 variables, we think this was a package drop. It started at 3 feet, and this was the acceleration that it reached. And, it's a lot of these variables that come together that are, looked at on a time variable basis, that are looked at, in conjunction with other variables. And we analyze those, form hypotheses, and then test them. And thus far in the development, we've had a lot of success in actually actively and accurately predicting, first analyzing and getting the right response, but also to some extent being able to predict where high risk routes and high risk areas are for similar types of events to happen.
Legit. So in like a layman's mind, which is mine, It would be comparable to me thinking kind of like Fitbit does with exercise detection, right? So it can try to determine kind of what you're doing and call out very specific exercises. You guys are doing that same thing for a box.
Bingo.
Right on.
And not just doing that, but also then being able to prescribe and make recommendations based on historical analysis to make sure that you're limiting your risk, moving forward. So if you have obviously couriers have hundreds, thousands of routes that they take, different drivers. We look for patterns between these different variables and correlations between these different variables to be able to predict where high risk events or excursions may occur in the future.
Perfect. And then before I rudely interrupted you to dive a little bit deeper into that, you were going to talk about how you differentiate competitors from competitors in a second way.
Yeah. So I was just laying out, no contextual intelligence, poor integration. They do a poor job of integrating into enterprise workflows. And then most of the solutions that are out there today from a telematics standpoint really focus on visibility, but they can't provide you with full chain of custody. And what I mean by that is they can't tell you specifically who packaged a shipment at a given supplier, vendor, or OEM. They can't tell you if your box was open before it reaches its final destination, exactly when it was open, where it was open. They can't provide you with electronic proof of delivery through the app or through the platform right then and there, real time, whereas we can do that. The biggest differences that we have compared to the competition, number one, we focus on that chain of custody. So we can actually capture who did the packaging, who did the unpackaging. We can capture any sort of real-time excursions that are happening throughout the lifespan of the shipment, whether that's route deviation, whether that's somebody's opening or tampering with your box or pallet or shipment, and that real-time electronic proof of delivery. Secondarily, we provide that contextual intelligence that I was talking about, right? It's not just a true or false value where a shock, event occurs and we're able to tell you precisely what happened with your package. And that enables us to partner with insurance companies. And basically, they're interested in the data that we collect. We also have a different business model. We're currently operating under a hardware-enabled SaaS model, which I think is a sexy way of saying it's a leasing model, but it's certainly a little more investor friendly. As a part of that business model, we actually handle reverse logistics, which is a major pain point for the adoption of these kinds of solutions in the market. I think we're one of two.
And let's pretend like I don't know what reverse logistics means.
Sure. So reverse logistics is essentially, you have shipments that are sometimes shipped both ways. That would be a closed loop system. So you're shipping, a distributor might be shipping a piece of jewelry to a retailer, and that retailer might be returning more jewelry that wasn't used or wasn't sold back to the distributor. Reverse logistics is where it doesn't come back. So it's only a one-way use case. Right. So we actually handle going out and collecting, these units from their delivery points and handling all of the logistics so that the customers don't have to worry about, hey, how do I get these units back to the starting point?
Got it.
And then the final piece is, just from the UX UI standpoint, I think, if you go in and look at our platform, a lot of these platforms that are currently on the market are somewhat dinosaurs from a UX perspective. They're very not user-friendly, very unintuitive. As I mentioned earlier, they don't integrate well into enterprise workflows. And one of the biggest pieces that we focused on throughout the early stages of development was, we partnered with these enterprise partners before we even had a finished product or before we even had an alpha product. And we worked very closely with our partners to make the process as intuitive, as user-friendly, as modern as possible. So shipping with one of our units, one of our IoT solutions is literally as easy as starting a Bird or a Lime e-scooter bike. It's a very simple process.
So then I'm going to say this back to you to make sure I got the value prop right. So then you are going to an OEM, you're licensing the solution to them, kind of like a SaaS license. Then the reason why they're doing that is because they could potentially get better rates from insurance carriers, and they would certainly get, in theory, they would certainly get happier customers because they're getting products to that customer in a safer, more reliable way. Is that all correct?
That is correct. And that second part applies to both the inbound and the outbound supply chains. So
right.
For them, inbound supply chains, you think of an automotive or an industrial manufacturing company, they're getting raw materials and, expensive parts from LCCs, low-cost countries all over the world with really long lead times, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks. If you don't know that part is running late, or you don't know that part has been stuck at customs, or you don't know that part has been damaged while it's being shipped, and then that gets to your, plant, and you don't have that part, or it's broken, or something's wrong with it, that cost of shutting down the line is tremendous. So both on the inbound side, they care about the visibility. They care about not just being able to see where it is, but the condition that these products are being shipped in, to make sure that nothing's wrong from a temperature humidity perspective, no risk of damage, et cetera. And then on the outbound side, to your point, it's obviously a customer delight, to where they can intercept or they can go to the customer real time as an issue has occurred and say, hey, you know what, our shipment to you guys has gotten stuck, or we think that, there was a very heavy event and there was likely damage. So we're going to ship out, a replacement order right away. And in the meantime, that OEM can go out and kickstart the claims process ahead of time.
Got it. Perfect. I think one of the things that's particularly interesting to me about your story is you're relatively early stage. You've got, sounds like 9 pretty legitimate OEMs on board in terms of working with you through a beta. You've got some very nice investors already in your first round. I'd love to know, where did that early traction come from? Is that all through introductions in the generator program? Is it that strong of a program, or is that your background and your co-founders' backgrounds in terms of just the networks that you were able to bring to bear out of the gate? I'd love to know. I mean, for a company as early stage as you, it sounds like you've got some great backing and traction. I'd love to know where you think at least that's coming from.
Sure. Yeah. So my background, I spent some time in the corporate world. I spent some time in global supply chain and strategic sourcing at Cummins. I did the whole strategy and operations management consulting for a while, living out of a suitcase. And then I had actually spent just about 2 years working on a different startup. I made a lot of connections that way. That was, a logistics startup. I made a lot of connections in the venture world, in the customer world through that experience. At the end of the day, it ended up not working out from a standpoint of the team decided to go separate ways. There were just different opinions as to how to move the company forward. And we ended up starting Paxafe, halfway through the generator program. I think, Generator has what they call, investor swarm. It's basically a 3-week investor roadshow. We made that decision and really, started our company fresh. I think it was the day before. We were putting the pitch deck together all night, not knowing anything about, having limited understanding, I would say, of, the industry that we had kind of pivoted to and were targeting. And a lot of these relationships did come out of the program. It is a very strong program. Joe and Troy, the founders, are great. They're always a text or a call away. And a lot of the traction wasn't, I wouldn't say it was immediate. So there were obviously a lot of questions and concerns from an investor point of view with regards to the whole split. Why did we do that? Why did it happen? Is it going to come back to bite us? It took us, a good 4 or 5 months to really work through that and to fully separate and to fully, start put together a vision for Paxafe and what we think this can be. So we ended up closing our first, what we call a pre-seed round of about $1 million late last year in October of 2019. But yeah, I would say a big part of those investor relationships, some of them carried from my previous experience and from my own network, and a lot of them did come through Generator, but they were not. It certainly didn't happen overnight. The other thing I'll say about Generator, and I guess I'm kind of giving them a plug here, it's not just the investor connections. We had a heck of a time going through the PPP application process with our bank. We went through, a different bank that came highly recommended. They knew, and they know that a lot of their startups, their portfolio companies are having issues. So they put us in touch with a really good, smaller kind of regional bank in Wisconsin. And it was the most simple, the most seamless process, that I could have imagined. It was very different going through this second round of PPP applications than what we had to go through in the first. And we got approved. And, so there's a lot of both immediate ROI. And then I would say it's really a lasting ROI when you go through a program like Generator, where they can, literally jump in and help you through issues that come up at any given point in time.
Awesome. Hey, Ilya, do you guys at Paxafe have any swag that you hand out to employees or customers?
We do. We have pens, we have coasters. Typically, we'll get it before any big conference, but very limited, I would say.
Pens and coasters, man, that does not sound exciting at all.
It's not. It's boring.
So I've asked this question a lot now, a lot is maybe relative, like at least 10 times. And I think one of the most interesting ones that I've heard recently is you can get branded hand sanitizer, which, given the state of the world, if you go to future conferences, might not be a bad play.
That's perfect timing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you need more pens or coasters, you can head out to fuelmerchandise.com. The Fuel Merchandise Group does a bunch of branded corporate materials. So it can be employee-facing, customer-facing, anything you want to put your logo on. They probably have it out there. And if you mention startup competitors, you'll get 10% off your first order.
Awesome. Thanks for the insight.
Switch gears a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about, you had mentioned before, you obviously don't have product market fit. You're working through your beta. That totally makes sense. What do you think, as you and your team talk about the future, what do you think product market fit looks like? What are some of the signs that you're looking for that will make you think that you'll have it? Or not that you will have it, that came out wrong, but like, when will you know you have it, I guess, is the better way to ask that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I think different founders, different VCs will tell you different things. I think Y Combinator, actually, a lot of their videos had put it best. It's basically, if you have to think about it or if you have to ask yourself, you don't have it. You're going to know when you have it. And it's going to feel like the walls are being knocked down and you literally can't, look up and get a gasp of air in, because there's such a strong demand relative to anything that you'd experienced before. In our case, we're working right now. The good news is I'd mentioned, 9 enterprise partners, 400 units out in circulation. This is literally, on an average standpoint, about 5% from a TrackX unit count of what we would see in commercial runs. So these are fairly high volume use cases where, some of our larger customers have use cases of more than 5,000 units on an annual basis. Some of the smaller ones are typically around that 300 to 500 mark. So these are not, low volume shipments. These are pretty high volume use cases. I think what we're trying to prove out now, through these pilots is really, first, from an IoT standpoint, the validity of and consistency, the accuracy and consistency of the data. So not just can we accurately define each event that's going on, each excursion, can we accurately say, that this was this type of damage that a temperature excursion happened here. But then beyond that, based on the historical data that we collect, how can we start to accurately predict where these issues are most prone to occur? And how does that accuracy look? I think, obviously that second part is going to take time because you need a lot of historical data. And, we don't expect to get the predictive part of what we're doing right, at least for another year or two even. But making sure that we're trying to set the gold standard in asset tracking, in asset IoT tracking. The market, as I mentioned, is very fragmented. There's a lot of solutions out there, and there is no one kind of clear leader for the reasons that I had already listed. So we're trying to use machine learning and various analytics principles to basically set the standard in the accuracy, the consistency, and the reliability of the data to provide much more contextual insights so that companies aren't just getting data, but they're getting data that then can answer, so what?
What's been the most difficult challenge you guys have faced to date in trying to take this product to market?
That's a good question. From a company or from a product standpoint, I'd say, we got 9 enterprise partners on board, so I think we're definitely doing something right, and that's probably from a pool of I'd say 40 to 50 viable conversations that we had that had gotten to some form of interest. So a 20 to 25% conversion in B2B is solid, pretty solid. I think obviously there are barriers through the B2B sales cycle that I now appreciate a lot more being on the other end. I mentioned I was a part of supply chain and supply chain strategy and strategic sourcing at Cummins. So I understand the enterprise procurement process. I understand how, suppliers and vendors are vetted, audited, et cetera. From a sales point of view, now, there are just a lot of barriers and hoops that you have to run through. Everything from, politics and internal, corporate politics and going through the process, but also, convincing people of the value prop and of the ROI, especially before you have product or really any documented use cases. That's the biggest challenge in being a, pre-product market fit, even to some extent, when we were pre-revenue, a pre-revenue company. That's really hard to sell. You have people companies that think that they have real-time visibility. And, you'll say, oh, cool. Let me see what process or what tools are you using? And they'll provide you with a tracking number that you go and log into the carrier platform. And basically what you would go in to look at where your shipment is, through the Amazon platform or through a UPS platform. That's obviously not what we do and not what we provide. So communicating that, that full value prop and that full scope of service, of solution in, a 5-minute time frame or however long you have their attention, and being able to do that and being able to break through to the right person within the organization to do that is particularly challenging. From an administrative point of view, we had to work through a major hurdle last year where my co-founder, Ashok, had to go through more or less a lottery process. So he went to grad school here. He went to Brown in the U.S., but his visa was expiring and he had to go through the immigration lottery process. And that is, as you might know, a very randomized process with very little control or very little impact that, Ashok can directly make on making his case. We had to basically scramble and look for worst case scenarios where if he did not get through that lottery process, he would have had to leave the country. And we were fortunate enough, again, through our generator network to come into contact with a great group out of Michigan, Global EIR in partnership with Global Detroit. Ashok, applied for the program. He got accepted. And, that enabled him to stay in the US. So again, I guess I didn't mention this plug for Generator, but their network has really kind of saved us or gotten us out of some pickles that we've gotten ourselves into through these first 16 months of operation.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you look forward, what do you think the next big challenge will be that the team's going to have to tackle?
So right now, when we look at Paxafe and what we envision ourselves, becoming, we're figuring out the whole IoT piece, and we've, developed a really good intelligence platform. We have two great machine learning engineers, Sahil and Vibhav, who are just doing a fantastic job on the product side, on understanding customer requirements. But it's really the longer term vision of what we want to do with that data. And we've already partnered, as I mentioned, with some insurance companies that really buy into the concept of enabling themselves to use our data to provide smarter, data-driven, pricing for their insurance products. I think to get through that, or to get that to work at scale, we need to get buy-in from the insurance brokers as well, because a lot of these insurance products and policies are purchased, from the OEM side at least, are purchased through brokers. And the other piece of it is the insurance world is a very small world, it seems. And that's something that we're learning, where everybody more or less knows everybody. A lot of the decision makers are based in London, as you might imagine. So, while we've dipped our foot into that pool, we certainly have, I would say, a long way to go in being able to effectively demonstrate that we can enable insurance companies to, through a data-driven approach, price their products more effectively, where they minimize their losses. They're able to, charge a little bit less on the premium side for very low risk shipments, which in most cases is 80 to 90% of the shipments, but then charge a bit more in the very high risk shipments, which is where they can offset, a big portion of their losses. But getting to that and executing on that is a pretty big challenge. We're certainly not putting the cart before the horse. So right now we're almost entirely focused on just getting the IoT piece right. But at the same time, we have to start rationalizing and, putting a roadmap together as to how the IoT piece will influence the insurance piece of what we're doing down the road.
Awesome. All right. I feel like I've already kept you a little bit too long. If folks want to get in touch with you, or if they want to learn more about Paxafe, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. www.paxafe.com. That's our website. We have a LinkedIn presence. Look us up on LinkedIn, Paxafe. Get in touch with myself or my co-founder. It's just our first name at paxafe.com. So in my case, it's ILYA at paxafe.com. My co-founder is Ashok, ASHOK at paxafe.com. Or you can just reach out to one of our standard mailboxes, help at paxafe.com. You'll get through to us any of those ways. We haven't really started, I would say, actively. We've been flying under the radar a bit over these last, probably through the first 12 to 14 months. And now that we've, initiated these, the pilots that we're doing, we're starting to be a bit more conscious about how we position ourselves in the market, setting up a social media presence. So, for that reason, we really appreciate you allowing us to come on your show and conduct this episode.
Oh, yeah, man. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you're thinking of launching a SaaS product, Startup Competitors can provide data on your closest competitors, survey potential users, or provide other product validation services. Learn more at startupcompetitors.com.